Over the past few years, we've seen the humble work ute go from what was a pretty basic tool of trade into something a bit more flashy, not to mention expensive, all while being the same fundamental machine underneath. Now for passenger cars and SUVs, we find ourselves recommending the mid to high level variants, mainly because that's where the value is. But for utes, well, it's almost the opposite. So today, we're going back to basics with the Holden Colorado LS-X to see if it can do everything it needs to for under 40 grand. Now the LS is the most basic crew cab pickup in the Colorado range. The LS-X simply bundles in a stack of accessories for just $1,500 more, saving you thousands in the process and resulting in a much more upmarket looking ute. You get this neat alloy sports bar, 16-inch alloy wheels, including the spare, a tinted bonnet protector, fog lamps, and a choice of 7 colours. This is Summit White. There's a 6-speed automatic transmission available at no extra charge. There's 3 years worth of free servicing, all on the road and out the door for around $38,000. That's some $20,000 less than the top spec Colorado Z71, which is essentially the same car. It's an identical 147 kilowatt, 2.8 litre, 500 Newton metre turbo diesel Duramax engine under the bonnet. It's the same on-the-fly select all-wheel drive system underneath the car. You got to ask yourself, do you really need to spend any more money? Well, a Colorado's never going to be called plush, but for this kind of coin, you can sort of forgive some of the hard, scratchy plastics and, well, 50 shades of grey around the cabin. The seats too, they're reasonably comfortable, but they do lack a bit of support, and I'm not a fan of the airline terminal fabric. One other feature you do get in the LS-X is a carpeted floor, which is a big step above the standard car's vinyl. Now, something that is a feature of all Colorados is the storage around the cabin. There's stacks of it. You've got 4 cup holders, 3 glove boxes, and of course, the big center cubby. Plus, there's a stack of space up here. There's pretty good space back here too, although not as much headroom as in the front. As you can see, my knees have got plenty of room to the seat that was in my driving position, and my toes in these big boots fit quite well under the seat. There's 2 ISOFIX points, a center armrest, rear and side curtain airbags, but you don't get mat pockets or air vents, but you do get a 12-volt outlet and bottle holders in the doors. Now the 7-inch MyLink touchscreen system up there is a bit of a mixed bag. The telephone and audio functions are pretty good, except the volume up and down buttons and slider are pretty annoying and generally a bit of a mess, and the Bringo navigation app that comes with it is quite possibly the worst thing ever. Now it's not a deal breaker, and we do expect to see Apple CarPlay and Android Auto roll out in the next Colorado, so we'd like to see Holden perhaps update the software on that unit. Now back here you get just over a 1-ton payload, which must include driver and passengers, remember, in a 1.5 metre wide and deep tray, which is 2.25 square metres for those playing maths at home. But if you need a little bit more space, well, check this out. Right, well this is a ready ramp. It's basically an aluminium frame that allows you to fold the tailgate down and extend the bed length of the ute, well, without any hassles. And thanks to my cool new laser measurer here, we've got exactly 2 metres from here to the cab, allowing you to fit a full-size trail bike in the back without any hassles. Plus, it doubles as a ramp to get the bike in the back. Cool, huh? Let's go for a drive. With 500 Newton meters of torque available from 2000 RPM, Colorado's actually got the most torque of any pickup in its class. And you can feel that it gathers speed relatively effortlessly, whether you've got a load in the back or you haven't, or even if you're towing with the 3.5 ton capacity. Out on the highway, it cruises pretty effortlessly and is relatively economical. We saw around 7 litres per 100 on the run down here, and currently averaging about 11, and we've been kicking around town and a little bit off-road. Now speaking of around town, when you're driving the Colorado in city streets, look, it still behaves like a ute. It's pretty firm, pretty bouncy, but it doesn't have some of that longitudinal float that we've found in some of the other pickups. In a way, it's relatively comfortable. You can feel the front compress, the back still jitters around a little bit, but even over some relatively harsh speed humps and cobbles in South Melbourne, it's pretty good and pretty comfy. Where it can get a little bit upset though is out here in the country, where you've got some, well, pretty dodgy roads with a lot of corrugations. You can really feel the Colorado bouncing around quite a bit. Now it's not jarring, It's just bumpy and bouncy, and I think, you know, obviously that's a key part of this being a load-bearing utility vehicle, but it is something to bear in mind if you're looking at doing a lot of country backroads miles in your Colorado. Now, where we've just been off-road, the Colorado's really in its element. Some rocky and rutted tracks, it's relatively nimble for such a big car. And bear in mind, it is dry. If it was wet, totally different story. These standard fit tyres are very truck-like, and they'd be a bit of a nightmare off-road in very, very wet clay terrain. Now, speaking of off-road, the selectable four-wheel drive system can go from 2 to 4-wheel drive while on the fly, or select 4-wheel drive low range when you're stationary. There's no standard diff locker, but there is a hill descent control mechanism just to help on some of those steep rutted tracks that you might be going down. Now, not unlike in the Wild West, living here in the Colorado, well, it's a pretty basic way of life, isn't it? You know, even the air conditioning controls here, very simplistic compared to the blue neon climate control system you see in up-spec models. But hey, it works, we're nice and cool. Now, you might be wondering, how's the noise in the cabin? I said you might be wondering how the... No, look, I'm only joking. It's not actually that bad in here. It is noisier than some of the flashier utes like the Ford Ranger, as we've seen, which is very much like an SUV. You do get a fair amount of tyre noise and engine noise and wind noise and, you know, noise. But it's okay. You turn up the stereo, which is actually pretty good, and go along with the ride. Now, here's the thing. We might be bouncing around, we might be sort of knocking on plastics and kind of sniggering, but I tell you what, I've got a big smile on my face. It's a pretty fun thing to drive. It's a very hard one to pin down, but I kind of like the Colorado. I've got a soft spot for the Colorado, and I'm not quite sure why. Now, this isn't the first time the Colorado's actually been a pretty sharp price point. In fact, on the way down here, we saw another LS-X and a couple of crew cabs. These things are everywhere. You can actually get them at a pretty good price if you do your shopping. But I think this is the first model that's sort of gone a little bit lifestyle with the cool sports bar out the back and the fog lights down the front. It's not terrible when it turns to street cred. I just wouldn't get a white one. You know, you look like you've just rolled off a mine. Well, look, the Colorado, it's pretty basic, but it's still capable, and it's certainly better suited in this role as a no-frills work ute than some gussied up lifestyle warrior. The LS-X package really just adds all the things that you'd probably put on there yourself, just makes it a little bit better when you rock up at Bunnings on the weekend. Now, we will see a new Colorado before the end of the year, so while these guys are being dressed up and run out, particularly when they're being bundled with that 3-year free service package, from a value proposition and a back-to-basics approach, it makes the 2016 Holden Colorado LS-X pretty solid proposition.